I buried friends, I buried love, and I buried dreams. But nothing cut me deeper than watching my own son laugh in my face, calling my advice useless, like an old man's words had no value. I stayed silent that day, but inside, my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. What Marcus didn't know is that life would drag him to his knees, and the very words he mocked would be the only thing keeping him alive. Yes, William Henderson, 78 years old, born and raised in the United States of America. And before I tell you how it all unfolded, don't be like my son Marcus. He ignored me. You just hit that subscribe button. It's free, and unlike his choices, you won't regret it. But let me start from the beginning. From that bitter December morning in 2010, when my son Marcus looked me in the eye and laughed at the most important advice I'd ever given him. I was 64 then, gray hair but still sharp, still running Henderson Financial Consulting from my small office in downtown Springfield. 35 years I'd spent building that business, helping families secure their futures, one honest dollar at a time. Marcus was 28, fresh from his MBA at Northwestern, and he burned with ambition like a fever. He had his mother's dark eyes. Sarah had passed 5 years earlier, but none of her gentle heart. Success had made him hard, and money had made him cruel. That December morning, he stood in my office wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His Rolex caught the winter sunlight as he delivered the news that would shatter our relationship for the next 8 years. Dad, I'm leaving for New York. Goldman Sachs offered me a position in their high-risk investment division. Starting salary is $400,000, plus bonuses. I set down my coffee carefully, buying time to process what he'd just said. Marcus, we talked about this. You were going to join me here, help me expand the business. He laughed, sharp, dismissive, cruel. Dad, this little operation makes what, $200,000 a year? I'll make that in 6 months at Goldman. Son, sit down. Please. I need to tell you something important. Make it quick. My flight leaves at noon. I walked to my desk and pulled out the small leather journal I'd kept since starting my business. Inside, I'd written the 3 most important lessons I'd learned about money, success, and happiness. Lessons I desperately wanted to share with him. Marcus, I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice. Promise me you'll remember them, even if you think they're old-fashioned. He checked his watch. That damn Rolex again. Fine. 60 seconds. I looked at my son, at the stranger he'd become, and felt my heart breaking. First, never trust anyone who promises you everything without asking what you're willing to sacrifice. Real success costs more than money. It costs your soul if you're not careful. Marcus rolled his eyes. That's fortune cookie wisdom, Dad. Second, I continued, my voice steady despite the pain. When you're climbing the ladder, remember that the people you step on today might be the only ones willing to help you when you fall. Pride is expensive. Son, make sure you can afford the price. Are we done here? I tore a piece of paper from my journal and wrote down my phone number and address, adding 1 line at the bottom. I folded it carefully and held out to him. Third, and this is the most important, love isn't weakness, Marcus. When everything else fails, it will fail. Love is the only thing that can save you from yourself. He snatched the paper without looking at it and stuffed it in his pocket. William, I love you, but you're living in the past. The world has changed. You either evolve or die. He called me William, not Dad. William. Marcus, please. Goldman Sachs has a reputation for making millionaires. He interrupted. Dad, I'm not you. I'm not content with helping small-town families save for retirement. I want to play in the big leagues. I want to win. What if you lose? His smile was ice cold. That's not going to happen. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and William? Thanks for the advice, but it's 2010, not 1975. Your way might have worked for your generation, but the world belongs to the ruthless now. The door slammed behind him, and I stood there staring at the space where my son had been, knowing I had just lost him to something darker and more dangerous than I could protect him from. But I also knew something Marcus didn't know yet. I knew that Goldman Sachs was about to be investigated for the biggest securities fraud in Wall Street history. And I knew because my old college roommate, FBI agent David Morrison, had been building the case for 3 years. Sometimes revenge begins with father's broken heart and ends with a son's salvation. 2 years later, December 2012. For 2 years, I didn't hear from Marcus. Not a call, not an email, not even a Christmas card. He'd erased me from his life as completely as he'd walked out of my office that December morning. But I heard about him. Oh, how I heard about him. Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Financial Times. Marcus Henderson had become their golden boy. At 30, he was Goldman Sachs' youngest vice president, managing a portfolio worth $2.8 billion. The headlines told the story. The wolf cub of Wall Street, $1 Million Marcus. How one man redefined high-risk trading. Henderson's hell. The hottest name in hostile takeovers. Each article painted the same picture. My son had become everything I'd warned him not to become. Ruthless, predatory, successful beyond his wildest dreams. The Forbes profile was the worst. In it, Marcus sat behind a mahogany desk in his corner office on the 47th floor, Manhattan glittering behind him like fallen stars. The interview made my blood run cold. I don't believe in emotional investing, Henderson explains, his steel gray eyes never wavering. Sentiment is expensive. My clients pay me to make money, not to make friends. If a company is weak, I destroy it. If an investment is profitable, I take it, regardless of who gets hurt. That's business. When asked about his background, Henderson is dismissive of his small-town roots. I learned everything I needed to know about business from watching my father, he says with a cold smile. He taught me exactly what failure looks like. Reading those words felt like being stabbed in the chest. But worse than his cruelty was his success. Marcus was making $3 million a year, owned a penthouse in Manhattan, drove a Ferrari and dated models. He was living the life he dreamed of, built on a foundation of everything I'd taught him not to value. My secretary, Dorothy Walsh, found me that day sitting at my desk with the Forbes magazine open to Marcus's picture. "Mr. Henderson," she said gently, "maybe you shouldn't read those articles." Dorothy was 67, a widow who'd worked for me for 20 years. She'd watched Marcus grow up, had baked him cookies on his birthdays, had worried about him like a grandmother. "Dorothy, what did I do wrong?" She sat down across from my desk. Something she only did when we needed to have a serious conversation. "You didn't do anything wrong. You raised a good boy. But somewhere along the way, that boy decided that good wasn't enough. He hates me." "No, Mr. Henderson. He hates what you represent. You represent conscience, and conscience is expensive when you're trying to get rich quick." 6 months later, June 2013, the phone call that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon. Dorothy buzzed me on the intercom. "Mr. Henderson, there's a Patricia Chun on line 2. She says it's about her father and Marcus." Patricia Chun. I remembered her father, Robert Chun, who'd owned 3 small restaurants in Springfield. I'd helped him plan his retirement, set up college funds for his grandchildren, navigate the 2008 financial crisis. A good man who'd worked 16-hour days his entire life to build something for his family. "Mr. Henderson," Patricia's voice was shaking, "my father is in the hospital. He had a heart attack yesterday. I'm so sorry, Patricia. Is there anything I can do? It's about Marcus Henderson. Your son. He convinced my father to invest his retirement savings with Goldman Sachs. All of it, $800,000. The room started spinning when, 3 months ago, Marcus came to Springfield, said he was visiting family, and stopped by Dad's restaurant. He was so charming, so confident. He told Dad he could triple his retirement money in 2 years with some sure-thing investments. My hands were trembling. "Patricia, what exactly did he invest in?" "I don't understand all the terms, but it was some kind of derivative trading, currency speculation, something called synthetic collateralized debt obligations." Marcus said it was low risk, high reward. Low risk. My son had told the 72-year-old restaurant owner that synthetic CDOs were low risk. "Patricia, where's your father now?" "ICU at Memorial Hospital." When he found out yesterday that he'd lost everything, all $800,000, he collapsed. The doctors say the stress triggered the heart attack. After I hung up, I sat in my office for 3 hours, staring at Marcus's business card that Patricia had faxed over. It had his direct phone number, his email address, his Manhattan office address. My son had come home to Springfield and destroyed a good man's life for what was probably a $30,000 commission. But I also knew something Marcus didn't know yet. The FBI investigation was closing in. Agent Morrison had called me the week before to let me know they were planning arrests within 6 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Systematic fraud, elder abuse, securities manipulation. Marcus wasn't just my son anymore. He was a federal criminal, and he didn't even know it yet. December 2013 to March 2015. The next 15 months were the height of Marcus's success and the depths of my despair. By Christmas 2013, Marcus had been promoted to senior vice president at Goldman Sachs. At 31, he was managing $4.2 billion in assets and earning $5 million a year. The Wall Street Journal named him one of America's top 40 under 40 financial titans. I read the article standing in the checkout line at the grocery store, watching my son's face smile back at me from a magazine rack. The article detailed his latest triumph, orchestrating a hostile takeover of a small manufacturing company in Ohio that resulted in 2,400 people losing their jobs, but generated $89 million in profit for Goldman's clients. Henderson shows no remorse for the human cost of his business decisions, the article noted. When asked about the layoffs, he shrugs. Business isn't charity. If they wanted job security, they should have worked harder. 2,400 families destroyed for $89 million. And Marcus slept peacefully in his $8 million penthouse. But the cruelest blow came in March 2014, when Marcus was featured on the cover of Fortune magazine. The cover story was titled, "The Man Who Killed Main Street," and it was about how young Wall Street executives like Marcus were reshaping American business by prioritizing profits over people. The article included a sidebar about Marcus's background. Henderson grew up in small-town Illinois, the son of a local financial advisor who specialized in conservative, low-yield investments. "My father taught me what mediocrity looked like," Henderson explains. "I decided I wanted the opposite of his life. But the part that destroyed me was near the end." Henderson's father still runs a small consulting firm in Springfield, Illinois, serving local families and small businesses. When asked if he's proud of his son's success, William Henderson's response was unavailable for comment. "They'd called me. Fortune magazine had called my office. And Dorothy had told him I had no comment about Marcus's success. Because what could I say? That I was proud my son had become a monster? That I celebrated his ability to destroy people's lives for profit? That I was thrilled he used my name to build a reputation as the most ruthless young executive on Wall Street?" September 2014. The call I'd been dreading came on a Tuesday morning. Agent Morrison's voice was tired, sad. "William, we're moving forward with the arrests next month. Marcus is going to be charged with securities fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I wanted you to know before it hits the news." I closed my eyes and felt 31 years of fatherhood collapse around me. "How bad is it, David?" "Bad. We have evidence linking him to fraudulent sales to 47 elderly clients across 6 states. Total losses exceed $23 million. The Robert Chin case is just the tip of the iceberg. $23 million. 47 elderly people. My son had become a predator who fed on the vulnerable and called it success." "David, what's the likely sentence?" "Federal guidelines call for 15 to 20 years. Given the scope and the vulnerable victim population, he'll probably get the maximum." After I hung up, I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out the folder I'd been keeping on Marcus for the past 4 years. Every article, every interview, every mention of his success. I'd saved them all, hoping that someday I'd be able to feel proud instead of horrified. Now I knew that day would never come. October 2014 to March 2015. The arrests happened on October 15th, 2014. I watched the news coverage from my office as federal agents led Marcus out of Goldman Sachs in handcuffs. He was wearing a Navy suit and his expression was shocked, confused, arrogant. Even in handcuffs, he looked like he believed this was all a mistake that his lawyers would fix by morning. The charges were extensive: 127 counts of securities fraud, 43 counts of elder abuse, conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The prosecution painted a picture of systematic fraud that had been going on for over 3 years. The trial lasted 6 months. I followed every day of coverage, watched my son's arrogance slowly transform into desperation as witness after witness testified about how he destroyed their lives. Robert Chen's daughter Patricia took the stand and described finding her father unconscious on his kitchen floor, clutching a letter that informed him he'd lost everything. Mrs. Eleanor Kowalski, 78, testified that Marcus had convinced her to invest her late husband's life insurance money in guaranteed investments that lost 100% of their value within 6 months. 47 victims. 47 elderly people who trusted my son with their futures. The prosecution's case was devastating, but Marcus's defense was worse. His lawyers argued that he was just following Goldman Sachs' business model, that his clients knew the risks, that he was being scapegoated for an industry-wide problem. But Marcus himself destroyed any chance of sympathy when he took the stand in his own defense. He showed no remorse, no acknowledgement that his actions had hurt anyone. He maintained that his clients were sophisticated investors who understood the risks, even when faced with evidence that he'd specifically targeted elderly people with limited financial knowledge. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Marcus to 18 years in federal prison. As they led him away in shackles, Marcus looked directly at the news cameras and said 5 words that would haunt me forever. "This is all my father's fault." Even in complete defeat, even facing 18 years in prison, my son found a way to blame me for his choices. April 2015 to December 2020. For 5.5 years, Marcus disappeared into the federal prison system, like a stone dropped into dark water. He was serving his sentence at FCI Otisville in New York, a minimum security facility for white-collar criminals. But he might as well have been on Mars. I wrote him letters, dozens of them. I sent money to his commissary account. I tried to visit, but he refused to see me. According to the prison records, Marcus Henderson had no family, no friends, no one who cared whether he lived or died. But I cared. God help me. Despite everything he'd done, despite every cruel word and destroyed life, I still love my son. Dorothy retired in 2016, and I hired her replacement, a young woman named Jessica Martinez, who didn't know about Marcus. It was a relief to work with someone who didn't give me pitying looks every time his name appeared in the news. Because his name did still appear in the news, occasionally, usually in articles about white-collar crime or prison reform. Former Goldman Sachs VP Marcus Henderson, serving 18 years for securities fraud. Always the same description, always the same reminder that my son had become a cautionary tale. In 2018, I received a letter from Marcus, the first communication I'd had from him since his arrest 4 years earlier. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. "William, I'm writing to inform you that I no longer consider you my father. Your constant attempts to contact me are unwelcome and pathetic. I don't need your money, your letters, or your guilt. Everything that happened to me can be traced back to your weakness, your small-minded thinking, your inability to understand real success. You raised me to be a failure like you, and when I chose to be more than that, you couldn't handle it. Stop writing to me. Stop sending money. Stop trying to visit. You are dead to me. Marcus." I read that letter 50 times, looking for some sign of the boy I'd raised, some hint that my son was still somewhere inside the bitter, broken man who'd written those words. I found nothing, but I kept writing to him anyway. October 2020. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Prison calls always come at the worst times, designed to maximize the shock and minimize the hope. "Mr. Henderson, this is Warden Patricia Williams at FCI Otisville. I'm calling about your son, Marcus." My heart stopped. "Is he hurt?" "Mr. Henderson, Marcus attempted suicide last night. He's stable now, but he's in the psychiatric unit under observation. The room was spinning. What happened? He received some news yesterday about his appeals. His final appeal was denied, which means he'll serve his full sentence with no possibility of early release. He didn't take it well. 18 years. My son had been sentenced to 18 years, and he'd already served 5.5. He was 38 years old, and he was facing 12.5 more years in prison. He'd be 50 when he got out. If he got out, Warden Williams, I need to see him. Mr. Henderson, Marcus has specifically requested no family visits. He's been very clear about that. He tried to kill himself. Please. There was a long pause. I'll ask him again, but I can't force him to see you. She called me back 3 hours later. He said, no, Mr. Henderson. I'm sorry. December 2020. The second suicide attempt came 8 weeks later. This time, Marcus nearly succeeded. He was in a medically induced coma for 6 days, and when he woke up, the first word he spoke was Dad. Not William. Dad. Warden Williams called me personally. Mr. Henderson, I think you should come up here. Soon. I drove to New York that night, my 74-year-old body making the 7-hour trip on adrenaline and desperation. By the time I reached Otisville, it was dawn, and I looked like I'd aged 10 years since leaving Springfield. The psychiatric ward of federal prison is not a place designed for hope. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, the smell of disinfectant and despair. I sat in a small visiting room for 30 minutes before they brought Marcus in. I almost didn't recognize him. The man who shuffled into that room bore no resemblance to the arrogant, successful, cruel person who dominated Wall Street for 5 years. This Marcus was thin, gray-haired, hollow-eyed. He wore an orange jumpsuit and plastic sandals, and his hands shook as he sat down across from me. We stared at each other for 5 minutes without speaking. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, broken. Why are you here? Because you're my son. I'm not your son. I told you that 4 years ago. You'll always be my son, Marcus. No matter what you've done, no matter what you say, no matter how far you fall. You're still my boy. His face crumpled, and for just a moment, I saw the child he'd been before success and money and pride had poisoned his heart. Dad, I destroyed everything. 47 people, $23 million. I destroyed 47 families because I wanted to be rich. It was the first time in 10 years that Marcus had acknowledged what he'd actually done. I know, son. Robertson died. Did you know that? Heart failure. 2018. His daughter wrote me a letter. She said her father never recovered from losing his retirement money. She said I killed him. I reached across the table and took his trembling hands in mine. Marcus, don't. He pulled away. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. Don't tell me I was young and made mistakes. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew those people trusted me, and I stole from them anyway because I wanted to be successful. I wanted to prove that your way was wrong. And now, Marcus laughed, a sound so bitter and broken it made me want to cry. Now I know that your way was the only right way. But it's too late, Dad. It's been too late for 10 years. It's never too late, son. I have 12 more years in here. I'll be 50 when I get out, if I live that long. I have no money, no career, no future. Every elderly person in America knows my name as the man who stole their retirement. What kind of life am I going to have? I looked at my broken son, at the hollow shell of the boy I had raised, and I made a decision that would define the rest of both our lives. Marcus, do you remember the piece of paper I gave you the day you left for New York? He looked confused. What paper? The day you walked out of my office, I wrote something down on a piece of paper and asked you to keep it. Do you still have it? Dad, that was 10 years ago. I threw that away. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I'd written the same message on 2 pieces of paper that day, one for him, one for me. I unfolded it and placed it on the table between us. In my handwriting, faded but still legible, were these words. When you're ready to come home, call this number. No matter what you've done, no matter how long it's been, no matter how far you've fallen, This door will always be open. Love, Dad. Below it was my phone number and address. Marcus stared at the paper for a long time. Then he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Dad, I came very close to ending my life because I couldn't live with what I'd done. But I also couldn't live with the thought that I'd hurt you so badly. I spent 5 years in here hating you because it was easier than hating myself. I know, son. Why didn't you give up on me? I reached across the table and took his hands again. This time he didn't pull away because giving up on you would have been like giving up on myself. You're the best part of me, Marcus. You always have been. The success, the money, the cruelty, that wasn't you. That was just pain pretending to be strength. What do I do now, Dad? How do I live with what I've done? One day at a time, son, one day at a time. January 2021 to August 2023. That visit to Otisville changed everything between Marcus and me, but it didn't change the reality of his situation. He still had 12 years left to serve. He still carried the weight of 47 destroyed lives, and he still woke up every morning in a federal prison cell. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in 10 years, my son and I were talking to each other instead of at each other. I drove to New York every month, sometimes twice a month, to visit Marcus in the psychiatric wing of Otisville. Each visit, he looked a little more like the boy I remembered and a little less like the monster he'd become. In March 2021, Marcus started writing me letters. Real letters this time, not the bitter poison he'd sent before. They were filled with remorse, with questions about how to live with guilt, with desperate attempt to understand how he becomes someone capable of destroying innocent people's lives. Dad, one letter read, I've been thinking about Robert Chun. I remember him from when I was a kid. He used to give me fortune cookies when you took me to his restaurant. He always asked about school, about baseball, about whether I was being good for my father. And 30 years later, I convinced him to give me his entire retirement savings, and then I lost it in investments I knew were garbage. How does a person become capable of that? I wrote back, a person becomes capable of that when they stop seeing other people as people and start seeing them as opportunities. You weren't born cruel, Marcus. Cruelty is something you learned, which means it's something you can unlearn. May 2021. During one of my visits, Marcus told me something that made me understand how completely he'd lost himself. Dad, I need to tell you something. When I was at Goldman Sachs, I used to practice not feeling things. I would deliberately think about Robert Chun, about Mrs. Kowalski, about all the people whose money I was gambling with, and I would force myself not to care. I thought empathy was weakness, so I trained myself to be a sociopath. Why are you telling me this? Because the empathy is coming back and it's killing me. Every night, I lie in my cell and think about 47 families. I think about grandchildren who won't go to college because of me. I think about elderly people eating cat food because I stole their retirement money. I think about Robert Chin dying of a broken heart. Marcus was crying now. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so dark and painful I could barely stand to witness them. Son, guilt is appropriate. Guilt means your conscience is working again, but you can't let it destroy you. How do I live with this, Dad? How do I wake up every morning knowing what I've done? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. You live with it by deciding that the rest of your life will be spent trying to balance the scales. You can't undo what you've done, but you can choose what you do next. December 2021. Marcus started teaching a financial literacy class for other inmates. It was a small thing, but it mattered. He was using his knowledge of how financial predators operate to teach vulnerable people how to protect themselves. Dad, he wrote in one letter, I taught 23 guys this month how to recognize investment scams. Guys who will probably be targeted by people like me when they get out. It's not much, but it's something. June 2022. The breakthrough came during a visit when Marcus looked me in the eye and said something I've been waiting 10 years to hear. Dad, I need to tell you that you were right about everything. Every piece of advice you gave me that I laughed at, you were right. Success without character is just expensive failure. Pride is the most expensive thing you can buy. And love really is the only thing that matters when everything else falls apart. He paused and looked down at his hands. I wish I'd listened to you. I wish I'd been the son you deserved instead of the disappointment I became. Marcus, you were never a disappointment. You were a good boy who made bad choices. There's a difference. How can you still love me after everything I've done? I reached across the table and took his hands. Because love isn't something you earn, son. Love is something you receive. And my love for you isn't based on your success or your failures. It's based on the fact that you're mine. January 2023. Marcus's transformation accelerated in his 8th year of incarceration. He completed his GED teaching certification and started working with the prison education program. He began corresponding with some of his victims, not to ask for forgiveness, but to take full responsibility for what he'd done to them. Eleanor Kowalski, the 78-year-old woman whose husband's life insurance money Marcus had lost, wrote him back. Her letter was devastating in its honesty. Mr. Henderson, it read, I received your letter taking responsibility for stealing my husband's life insurance money. I want you to know that your actions forced me to move in with my daughter's family because I can no longer afford to live independently. I work part-time at age 80 because you stole my retirement. I will never forgive you, but I acknowledge that you finally told the truth about what you did. Marcus showed me that letter during one of my visits. Dad, this is what justice looks like, not the prison sentence. This, having to face what I actually did to real people. August 2023. The letter that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning in August. I was in my office, reviewing client files, when Jessica brought me the mail. Mr. Henderson, there's something here from the Bureau of Prisons. It looks official. My hand shook as I opened the envelope. After 8 years of monthly visits, dozens of letters, and countless prayers, I was terrified of what official correspondence from the prison system might contain. But the letter wasn't about punishment or problems. It was about something I'd never dared hope for. Dear Mr. Henderson, your son Marcus Henderson has been selected for federal prison system's compassionate release program based on his exemplary behavior, his work with victim advocacy, and the recommendation of 3 federal judges who have reviewed his case. Marcus is eligible for immediate release contingent upon verification of suitable housing and employment. As his listed emergency contact and sponsor, we require your signature on the attached forms if you are willing to accept responsibility for his transition back into society. Sincerely, Patricia Williams, Warden FCI Otisville. Compassionate release. After 8 years, Marcus was coming home. But as I read the letter a second time, I realized something that made my heart race with both hope and terror. My son was being released into a world where his name was synonymous with elder fraud, where 47 families still hated him, where he had no money, no career prospects, and a felony record that would follow him forever. Marcus was coming home, but the world he was coming home to was going to try to destroy him all over again. That's when I realized that my 10-year plan was about to reach its final phase. September 2023. Marcus walked out of FCI Otisville on September 15th, 2023, carrying everything he owned in a cardboard box. 8 years, 4 months, and 12 days after federal agents had led him away in handcuffs, my son was a free man. I was waiting for him in the parking lot, sitting in the same pickup truck I'd driven to New York dozens of times over the past 8 years. At 77, I'd grown frilier, but my resolve had only strengthened. Marcus looked older than his 41 years as he walked toward me. His hair was completely gray now, his face lined with the kind of deep creases that come from years of genuine remorse. He wore the cheap clothes the prison had given him, ill-fitting jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and sneakers that had seen better days. But his eyes were different. The cold, predatory gleam that had made him so successful on Wall Street was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Humility. Hi, Dad. Hi, son. Ready to come home? He nodded, unable to speak, and climbed into the passenger seat. We drove in silence for the first hour, both of us processing the reality that he was finally free. Dad, he said, as we crossed the state line into Pennsylvania, I need you to know that I don't expect anything from you. I know what I did. I know what I cost you. And I don't expect you to just welcome me back like nothing happened. What do you expect? Honestly, I expect you drop me off at a homeless shelter somewhere and wish me luck. It would be more than I deserve. I pulled the truck over at a rest stop and turned to face him. Marcus, do you remember what I wrote on that piece of paper 10 years ago? That the door would always be open. Do you believe I meant it? He was quiet for a long time. I want to believe it. But Dad, I'm not the same person who left 10 years ago, and I'm not the same person who went to prison 8 years ago. I don't know who I am anymore. Then we'll figure out together. 3 hours later, Springfield, Illinois. When we pulled into my driveway, Marcus sat in the truck for several minutes, staring at the house where he'd grown up. It looks smaller, he said. Everything looks smaller when you've been away. I'd spent the past month preparing for his return. His old bedroom was cleaned and ready, stocked with new clothes in his current size. I bought him a basic cell phone, opened a small bank account with $5,000 to get him started, and cleared out space in my office where he could work. Because Marcus was coming to work for me. As we walked up the front steps, Marcus stopped and turned to me. Dad, there's something I need to say before we go in there. What's that? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for what I did to those families. I'm sorry for what I said about you in the magazines. I'm sorry for blaming you for my choices. And I'm sorry for the 10 years I stole from us by being too proud and too stupid to listen to you. I put my hand on his shoulder. Apology accepted. Now come inside. You're home. The first month. Marcus's transition back to civilian life was harder than either of us had anticipated. 8 years of prison routine had made normal decisions overwhelming. The first time I sent him to the grocery store, he came back empty